Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Lindsay Unfiltered. And today we're diving into part 3 of Shari Franke's book review, The House of My Mother. Now, we've gone over the first 2 parts where Shari lays the framework, how she talks about how her mother, Ruby Franke, was not ever really a nurturing mother, but that only got worse when she got affiliated with a group named Connections. Now, in part 3, we're going to examine how Shari got involved deeper with the group Connections. She started talking to Jody Hildebrandt, and how her life seemed to spiral out of control from there. This book is a really good read. I do advise each and every one of you to go and get the book. If you haven't got the book, go get the book. I'm going to link it down below so you guys can go and grab the book. It's easy to read, yet it is deep. So I think you guys will really enjoy this. The people that have been enjoying the Ruby Franke series, this will be a Ruby Franke week. So you guys will be very excited because there is a Ruby Franke program coming out on Hulu. So we'll be covering that, and we will be finishing this book this week. If you like content like this that revolves around scandal, controversy, true crime with a twist of humor, hit that subscribe button. And without further ado, let's get into Shari Franke's The House of My Mother. And chapter 18 is titled Isolation Tactics, right? So we did talk about cults and how, in my humble opinion, cults use isolation to gain control of the minds of the people that they victimized, right? So isolation was a big one for Connections as well. Shari talked about how she feels her mother has been hurt for years. Since childhood, she's been missing a deep component of something that unfortunately snowballed into what those children had to face growing up. She says, "I'd never thought about it before, that even those who present a flawless facade to the world, like my mother, might be struggling with deep-seated issues that remain hidden from view. How their polished exterior can serve as a mask, concealing the inner turmoil and unhealed wounds that continue to fester beneath the surface." I would call this putting on a good front, you know? You're presenting a good front. You're presenting a wholesome Christian family, but underneath you're dealing with some real issues. You're dealing with some mental issues. You're dealing with some PTSD. You're dealing with deep issues that are eating away at your soul. And if you don't seek help for those issues and you keep piling more makeup and more masks and hats and things on top of it, one day you're just going to combust, right? And I think this was no exception for Ruby Franke, right? The fact of the matter is, people around her should have noticed, right? It wasn't like her and her family were off on a compound away from everybody. They interacted with people. And I'm sure those people had a hunch. Something ain't right about Ruby, right? Why did everyone around them fail them as well? Is it because everyone they associated with were a part of Connections? That's part of that isolation tactic that these groups do. They want you surrounded by people that only believe what they believe, so that negative thinking is reinforced every single day, right? The time comes, guys. You guys know up to this point, Chad is in therapy with Jody, and now Ruby turns to Shari and says, "Hey, Shari, you need to be in therapy with Jody as well." And Shari's like, "No, I don't need that." And threats are then being made. In chapter 18, she says, "The choice is yours, Shari. You either do one-on-one counseling with Jody, or we take away your car, your phone, and pull you out of school entirely. You decide." So of course she's going to decide to do the counseling. She wants her car. She wants her phone. She wants to go to school and be a normal, functioning young teenager. So she's kind of forced to do this therapy. Again, it's one thing if you want to subscribe to a cult or a non-conventional way of thinking. It's another thing to submit your minor children to it against their will. She goes on to describe her experience like this. She says, "At 17, I was a prisoner of circumstance. No friends outside our community, no support system, no escape route. I wished I could have walked out that door and never come back. But the cold truth was I had nowhere to walk to." In so many situations of abuse that I've seen, that I've heard about, the person wants to leave, right? They want to leave. They can imagine a life without this person, without these people, without this abuse, but they don't have the means to. The other person's controlling their finances. The other person's controlling a lot of different aspects about their life. So they just can't up and leave. They're solely dependent on the person. Something important to take a note of is if you have your own things, if you're in control of your own assets, no one can take that away from you. But the second you submit to another person, their word is their word, right? She didn't really have any choice in this. They were her parents. She was a child, but I'm just saying there are adults who are completely financially dependent on other adults, right? And when you're in that situation, whether it be your husband, your parent, whatever the case, you have to do what they say at the end of the day, because where will you go, right? So I did understand where Shari was coming from with that. In chapter 21, Jody says, Shari is now in counseling with Jody, and Jody is just telling her all kinds of things that are not helpful, right? She's criticizing her. She's very critical of Shari. I mean, it's okay for a therapist to give you some accountability. They don't have to be a huge softie if that's what you want. But it just seemed like it was pure negativity. Everything that Shari would think, say, or do was wrong. And Shari began believing this, right? She began believing in this idea of distortion and living in your truth, right? To the fact where she's going to school and telling her friends this. Her friends that are going through issues with boys or issues with their parents, whatever the case may be. And she's telling them this. She's pushing it on to other children as well. She told one of her friends that true growth comes from confronting our deepest flaws. She asked her if she was willing to do the work. And her friend said, "Oh, get lost, Shari. Who even are you anymore?" So she's going out into the community, pushing this on her friends. Her friends don't want to hear that, right? This isn't the person that I used to know. You're not the person that I used to know. Okay, sorry. I lost my pipes a couple of years ago. Anyway, she also talks about how connections gave her this special feeling of importance. This special feeling of, hey, I'm important. You ever had something in your life that, whether it be a job, whether it be something you were performing in, a presentation you were doing for work, whatever the case, and you're like, wow, I am the shit. It's okay to be confident in yourself, right? But there's a point when confidence becomes overconfidence, cockiness. So she was starting to develop that mindset where what I believe is it. Shari was grasping this from Jody. She described that a little bit like this. She said, that's what being in a cult-like connections feels like. Like you're special and no one else understands the special knowledge that you have. It's addictive. My eyes were sharp and my tongue sharper as I sought out every imperfect, distortion-filled soul that crossed my path. Pretty self-explanatory there. In chapter 22, Burn It and Be Damned, they move into a new house. It's big, right? It's beautiful, but it's perfect. It's too perfect. Shari says, nothing's out of place. It just seems pristine, like this sauna they're trying to give off to the internet, right? She describes it as, in this house, a monument to artificial perfection. Nature provided my only taste of authenticity and warmth. Those open windows became my lifeline, a portal to the world that still felt real and alive, unlike the sterile emptiness that surrounded the indoors. So, the kids' relationship with their mother isn't good. Their parents' relationship with each other isn't good. And they're putting on this front for the camera. It's very cold. It's very phony. And Shari feels like the only way she can get a grasp of reality, realness, rawness, authenticity is to open her windows and let the God-given air hit her in the face. to look at the trees, because inside of that home, although beautiful, although expensive, was callous, was empty, emotionally void. She then starts talking about how Ruby became more fierce when it came to discipline. She describes that as punishments themselves took on more elaborate, almost theatrical, instead of swift, straightforward consequences. A flick in the lips, a slap on the cheek. Ruby began devising complex object lessons meant to teach us about empathy, responsibility, or whatever virtue she felt we were lacking. These often involved grand gestures or prolonged periods of deprivation, all designed to make us truly feel the weight of our transgressions. The more calculated and cold the punishments on her children became. You can see this if you look at the video where I read her journal. You can see that outlined. There was a method to this madness of hers, right? So, of course, people started to notice, right? YouTube subscribers started to notice this, and they spoke out about it, right? They said, you're being kind of harsh on the kids. Hey, you're being kind of harsh on the kids. Why are you saying that? You made your son sleep on a sleeping bag. They were seeing little signs. Little signs were popping up. Boop, 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 boop. They were popping up. And if the signs were bleeding through the videos, then what was happening when the camera was off? That's what we're supposed to see in the Hulu interview. And we have a strong reason to believe by reading the book that the relationship between Jody and Ruby was more than platonic. The nerve of this woman, this cheater at that. We'll get there. Trust me. That public outcry did nothing for Ruby. It made her obey Jody in her foolishness even more. And the book says, the very public outcry meant to shake my mother awake was driving her deeper into delusion. And instead of acknowledging her mistakes, Ruby burrowed deeper into the safe space of Jody's poison dart philosophy. In chapter 23, Obedient Little Drone, Shari tells us that over these months of therapy with Jody, that she noticed that Jody is kind of a hypocrite. She's doing things that she's telling Shari and the rest of the family not to do. She's a hypocrite, right? And she starts to play with Jody on this. She starts calling her out, calling her bluff. Well, didn't you say we shouldn't do that? Well, didn't you say, challenging her, showing her that, look, I may be complying because I feel like I have to comply. And some of the things you said may have gotten through to me, but you're not even following your own rules here. And then she talks about the type of people that get sucked into occult-like connections. She says, cults are thought to prey on the vulnerable, the lost, the broken. But here's the thing. They can also ensnare anyone who is simply a human searching for meaning, or people who are in a state of transition in their lives. Young adults coming of age, for instance. When we talk about Lawrence Ray, I did the Sarah Lawrence cult video, right? You guys enjoyed that one. Young adults coming into age, people searching for meaning, sustenance. That is Jody to me, right? What is her purpose? She probably felt like she had none. I don't know what she felt. I can't speak for her. But she seems like someone who would fall prey to something like this, right? She goes on to say, she had cultivated in Ruby and others a desperate need for approval and insatiable hunger for enlightenment that only Jody could satisfy. It was a brilliantly crafted trap, and Ruby had walked right into it, dragging our family along with her. Ruby was hooked. Ruby was sold. Ruby was head over heels for Jody. The rest of the family was like, mom likes this, It was Ruby. And she lost her marbles when it came down to this woman named Jody Hildebrand. Unbelievable. We get to chapter 25, and it's called Ninth Passenger. And this chapter talks about when Jody is going through a bunch of delusions and spiritual attacks. And Ruby says, hey, come live with us. You can live in my daughter's room. Screw my daughter. She doesn't need a room. You can come stay in our room while you're struggling with these attacks. Maybe all of the evil and all of the horrible things she was telling people to do to other people, to harm other people, were just eating her up at night and she couldn't sleep. Maybe that's what it was. But they said paranoia, delusions, what have you. She needs to sleep here with us. But she is your prophet. She is the one who tells you how to get out of these situations. She needs you. How is that possible? That shouldn't be possible. You should be going to her for help. That's what you pay her for, right? Okay, so Ruby goes to Shari and says, Jody's not well. She blurted out, skipping in pleasantries. She's being bombarded by the adversary. Her soul is under siege from Satan himself, Shari. He's trying to silence her truth, so she's moving in with us. And we're going to help her get better. I nearly dropped my phone. Wait, what? How do you just spring that on your family? She goes on to say, once Jody gets in and gets settled and is ready to crash into these people's house, the same people whose lives she turned upside down, she says, I watched Jody sweep past me, headed toward my bedroom like a conquering general, and felt the chill in my bones. This wasn't just a temporary inconvenience. This was the beginning of an occupation. And I absolutely love the way she expressed that to us. This is the beginning of an occupation. Wow. And you guys will soon find out in the next video. I'm going to try to make the next video the last video on the series. Jody and Ruby began sleeping in the bed together, sleeping together. I don't know why. Cults and sex go hand in hand. Why, right? It's not enough to have control of your mind, your soul, your money. They have to make it sexual. And this is all allegedly, according to the book that I've read so far, and according to other documents, right? The fact that it always becomes sexual with the cult leader lets us know that it is complete control over these people, mind, body, soul, everything. They want it all, right? With all kids home, husband home, y'all, that's what y'all need to do. Really. So getting a divorce, giving custody to your husband, and going on Tinder or wherever the hell you wanted to go to find a woman wasn't good enough. You had to do this instead. I don't get it. How dare you and Jody tell somebody to live in their truth when you weren't even living in yours? Unbelievable. I am on Ruby Franke's ass all week. We'll probably have a live, throw in some gypsy here and there. We're on her ass all week. I'll be looking at some of that body cam footage. I'm going to be finishing the book. We're going to be looking at the Hulu documentary. I'm on her this week. If you guys like Ruby Franke content, controversy content, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on her. If you guys want me to go live every day in March, get this video to 50 likes for me. Can you guys do it? If you guys do it, I'll do it. Thank you guys very much. This has been Lindsay Unfiltered. Bye now.